afternoon, everybody. Can you guys hear me okay? Fantastic. We're really excited. You guys had a good turnout. We appreciate that very much. A couple of reminders before we begin. No food and drink in the theater, so if you guys would, water's okay, but everything else, make sure it's put away. On top of that, please put your cell phones away, and remember to be respectful as we have our presenter present. I'd like to introduce Miss Irene Perbal. We are very excited to have her.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm going to go ahead and let you take over, okay?
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Can you all hear me? Even behind? Okay, that is very good. To start with, at this very moment that cruel armed conflicts came back to our world, I felt again the same sensations of fear and panic we had in 1940 when the Nazis invaded my country. We also were hundreds of people on the roads, running away from the cities, afraid of bombardments. We had to endure the shooting Nazi flying over us, parents trying to protect their children with their bodies, but we had nowhere to go. So the fear that children have in wartime is absolutely unspeakable because you don't understand. Your parents cannot explain why it is so dangerous. So that is really, I had to go through that. So I will you tell the whole story about my youth in the occupied Netherlands. I was born in 1933. Don't start calculating my age, that's not relevant. I was born in 1933 and I started with a very sheltered, nice life with my parents, little sister, and later, 10 years later, 2 little brothers. And we, like all the kids in Holland, we were ice skating on the frozen canals in the winter and bike riding in the summer. We had attended school, had lots of friends, a very normal, nice, sheltered life, until May 10, 1940, when Germany invaded the Netherlands. On May 14, Holland surrendered. And immediately they installed a German governor for the Netherlands. His name was Arthur Seyss-Inquart. He is a hardline Nazi extremist and later was judged and sentenced to death in Nuremberg. He immediately imposes the enforced conformity. Everything had to be like the Nazis wanted. And their aim was to make the Dutch country part of the Aryan fascist Nazi of Germany, nation of Germany. All Netherlands political parties were outlawed. Dutch associations and clubs such as Rotary, Freemasons were immediately forbidden. Within hours, freedom of speech and freedom of the press were suspended, followed by broadcasting services. We only were allowed to hear the propaganda of the radio, of the Nazi radio distribution. We had to bring all our shortwave radios to the Gestapo. Very soon there came a curfew. Nobody could be out in the streets after 8 o'clock p.m. until 6 o'clock a.m. next day. All our correspondence was opened and inspected. It did not happen all at once, but gradually in such a way that the people thought we are going back to normal, which unfortunately never happened. We had to darken all our windows and doors with black curtains or paper or whatever because no light could be seen at night because every night hundreds of Royal Air Force planes from England flew over our country to bombard Germany. But since we were an occupied country, we also were considered enemy territory. The sirens wailed when an air raid was going to happen. People ran for shelters in basements or even public shelters that we had everywhere. We were literally living in darkness and fear. In 1941, the Nazis issued ID cards for the whole population, and the Jews had them stamped with a big J, and they were obliged to wear the yellow David star. Jews had no right to their own business. It was all confiscated by the Nazis. They had no right to use telephones. All public transportation was void to them. They were expelled from all public employments, and they only could shop between 3 o'clock and 5 o'clock in the afternoon. They also were forbidden to enter houses of non-Jewish people. All of a sudden, our friends from school told us, we are going to travel, we're going to stay with my grandma. We didn't understand. They were going in hiding, but they could not tell us. So we thought, why don't you stay with us? That was one of the fears. And you could see that those children were in fear. My father was outraged with the behavior of the Nazis. My father, grandfather, and uncles, all the masculine members of our family were in the resistance. And from the very beginning, my father started hiding Jewish people in our house, in spite of the Nazis' warning that whomever helped a Jew would be treated like one. I can remember the names of at least 10 people who came to our house, not all at the same time, because they were brought to older addresses or older ones came in. People had to be extremely careful because the Nazis rewarded whomever could tell them where Jews were hidden. So we could not even trust our neighbors or even our friends. We as children did not even know their real names. They all had false papers anyhow, and for us they were just uncles and aunts. But we were involved in such a way that every day my parents told us, don't talk about the aunts and uncles in our house, because it's very dangerous, the Germans will come and take us all away. Be careful, don't talk to nobody, not even to your best friends. And you know, when you're a kid, you want to tell your best friends what's going on. A massive deportation of the Jews from the Netherlands started to happen on a daily basis. The Nazis frequently raided all the houses in our street. Usually early in the morning, they closed the street on both sides with barbed wire and went into house and house and house, dragging out the people, separating the families. They came several times to our house without finding the hidden people, because my father had a perfect system of hiding in the attic under our coal box, and we had a little bell knob at the door. We immediately could warn the people upstairs to go in hiding when we saw soldiers. They searched all the houses. We saw a lot of screaming, and because they separated families, the men on one side, the women on another side. One of the scariest moments in my life was one morning I woke up and my father was standing next to my bed with what seemed a giant Nazi soldier, armed from head to toes. And just at my eyesight, he had hand grenades in his boot. And I was so afraid because just a few days earlier, they did a demonstration of the damage that a hand grenade could do. So everybody in my family was in the resistance. When injustice becomes law, resistance becomes duty. Since the Gestapo confiscated all our radios, we had to bring them to the Gestapo, several Dutch people started hiding their shortwave radios because that's how we could listen to Radio London from England, where we could hear what was really happening. Because the distribution radios of the Nazis, they only gave their propaganda. So my grandfather had a hidden radio. He made notes for his friends of what happened really. But for a grown-up man, it was dangerous to go in the street because they could be deported to labor camps for the Germans. Not concentration camp, but labor camps. So my grandfather said, you kids are gonna help me. I have some little rolls of paper here. You put it in the handlebar of your little scooters, and you go play in the street, but you will have to help me. You have to go to that and that address. Repeat, yes. You have to talk to Mr. Jansen. Repeat, yes, Mr. Jansen. If Mr. Jansen is not there, don't give it to his wife, don't give it to his brother, nor his children. And when they ask, why do you want to talk to Mr. Jansen? Just tell them, my grandpa wants to talk to him. So we became messengers without knowing. And of course, we were kids playing with a little scooter. The Germans didn't pay attention. They only confiscated good, nice bicycles, not our little scooters. So we needed food stamps or coupons to buy food. And everything was rationed. That was another way of controlling the population. Of course, the hidden people in our place didn't have official papers and had no food stamps. So my father started working in the food stamp distribution, and he, with other members of the resistance, started falsifying food stamps in order to be able to feed the people who were in hiding. But we had to be so careful. There were always people on the loop. If there was a suspect movement, they told the Gestapo. So it was fear the whole time. It's like Anne Frank's Alive. We were frozen with fear when a truck stopped in our street. On June 6, 1944, 6 days after my 11th birthday, the Gestapo came back to our house. Those were not even German soldiers. Those were Dutch traitors working for the invader. I was almost ready to go to school when the bell rang. I opened the door and I saw 3 men in normal clothes, no soldiers. I didn't even think about pushing the bell for the upstairs people. And they came up the stairs and I asked, what do you want? They said, IRS. My mother came along and said, what's happening here? They said, IRS. And my mother said, well, show me your badge, let me know what. They pushed my mother, she fell on the floor, and they went upstairs and found the Jewish people. At that moment, there were 2 gentlemen with us, and they brought everybody down to the living room. They asked my mother, where's your husband? And my mother said, my husband is working, but I can call him. No, they said, give us his telephone. My mother had my little brother on her lap, and he said, what is your doctor? My doctor is Dr. Dubois. So one of the guys called my father's workplace and said, Mr. Perbal has to come home immediately because the oldest of the two babies is dying. When I heard that, I thought, you know what, I'm gonna go to school, but instead of school, I will go to the streetcar stop and tell my dad not to come home. So I said, sir, I have to go to school. If not, I will be late. He said, nobody leaves the house. When some time later, my father came in, he looked at my mother, who had my little brother in her arms. He wanted to see what happened to the baby. I smacked him in his face and said, don't give signs to your wife. We will tell you why you're here. And I started insulting him in the most horrible way, insulting and accusing of all kinds of crimes. It was absolutely terrible. And then they took away my father and the two Jewish gentlemen to a school in our street that became the Gestapo headquarters. We were totally lost. My mother with 4 children, they didn't take the whole family away because we were not Jewish. Because Jewish families, they took infants, elders, everybody. So next day, they came back with moving vans and confiscated everything we had in the house. Everything they took away. So we were there in an empty house, not knowing what. The resistant people helped us to find a small apartment, and we had to borrow mattresses and table and chairs from friends and family. With our food stamps, we only could buy some potatoes, a matchbox-sized quantity of butter, and half a cup of sugar and flour and 1 bread a month per person. Meat and eggs were only available at the black market and for exorbitant prices. There was no soap, only bars of a kind of clay, and we had no water, only an hour a day, and then we had to fill up all the containers we had to have water. So a lot of people got skin diseases, menses, and lice because of the lack of hygiene, no soap, no water. Not only food and medicine was scarce, but everything else. We had no clothes. We had no fabric to make clothes, no shoes or leather to make new soles under our shoes. I remember that one of my uncles cut off the upper part of our shoes and nailed it to wooden soles so we could go on a little more. And when they really became too short, they cut off just the front part and our toes could come through. It was hard to imagine. On September 5, 1944, D-Day happened, the invasion in Normandy. We expected to be liberated at any moment because of the rapid advance of the Allied troops. France, Belgium, and the south of the Netherlands already were free. But we in Amsterdam were still in the suffocating grip of the Nazis, who became meaner and meaner every day. The food became even more rare, since there was no transport, and anyhow, what was left was confiscated for the Nazi soldiers, and all the stores were empty. We did not imagine that the worst was still to come. The winter of 1944-45 was called the Hunger Winter. It was the coldest on record. We were starving, had no means to warm our houses, and even the food stamps were worthless because all the shops were empty. We only could get at the public kitchen 1 scoop of a watery mixture of cabbage stems, potato peels, and residues of sugar beets, with no nutritional value whatsoever. The only thing it had, it was warm, but when you reached house, it was already cold. The whole civilian population was undernourished, and we saw more than once dropping people dead in the streets from starvation. During that hunger winter, more than 30,000 people died from hunger and illnesses in our country. We survived with what we called wonder stoves. Little stoves made of a coffee can with a little chimney inside, in which you could burn cardboard, twigs, or chopped up furniture, whatever we had. And as soon we could boil a pot in 15 minutes, more or less. So when my mother had some rice or some potatoes or whatever she could get, she boiled the pot, and when after the boil, she put it in a box with hay, with holes in it, covered it with a blanket, and the heat finished the cooking of the food and kept it more or less warm until dinner time. That is why later in life I became an avid teacher of solar cooking, integrated cooking, because I know what all you can do without having real cooking gear. On May 5th, 1945, the Canadians entered in Amsterdam, followed by the Americans. And Germany finally surrendered. We were free. Everybody in the streets, dancing, singing, greeting our liberators. We all wanted to go to the Royal Palace, which was the icon of our own nationality. But the resistance warned us, don't go to the Royal Palace, because there are still German soldiers entrenched there, and they shoot everybody who comes near. So many people still lost their life after the liberation. The Dutch brought out all their uniforms that had been forbidden for 5 years. Military, police, boys' scouts, girls' scouts, even the postman. All had been forbidden, so I don't know, they found their uniforms, Dutch flags everywhere, with a nice orange banner, which is the color of our royal house. My mother had a very nice orange silk dress that we happily tore apart to make scarves for all of us. Food was still absent, but a few days later, the British Royal Air Force, with His Royal Highness Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands, started the Operation Manna, food that comes from heaven. We saw the planes swooping over our airport, over Amsterdam, and we all went to the rooftops to see it, to put thank you, and they dropped parachutes with packets of food at the airport. 2,800 Lancaster planes dropped about 6,600 tons of food. It was fantastic. We had food after all those times that we were always hungry. In the beginning, we had nice big cans with crackers and lard. So I said, that looks very good. We started putting lard on crackers. We started eating. We became so sick. Our organism could not handle rich food like that. We really had to do that very little by little. And then later on, there came outer packages with milk powder and egg powder and even little bars of Cadbury chocolate. So that was heaven. An interesting thing is that when I did this presentation in Jackson, one of my friends brought her father-in-law from England. And when he heard my story, he said, I participated of the Operation Manna. And I probably dropped the food for you because I was the rear gunner. So I went to him, and it was very emotional that after 75 years, I could say, thank you, sir, to somebody who saved us from hunger. I intended to visit him and to bring him some chocolate in memory of the Cadbury, but unfortunately, the day I had to go, my friend called me and said Ron passed away in his sleep. I was very sad, but then Martha here told me, look what a beautiful completion of his life. Somebody he saved could thank him. So yeah, really, it was a very special, you will see the pictures at the slides later. Very soon after that, at the football stadium, that was near our apartment, the buses arrived from Germany, bringing home the political prisoners from the concentration camps. It was heartbreaking to see those living skeletons still in their ragged gray and blue uniforms. Many of them could not even walk, had to be carried. We went every day with a picture of my father. Please, did anybody see him? Did anybody know him? Unfortunately, that could not help us. And we went back home in tears. When my mother said, there will be other buses tomorrow, he might be there. My two uncles, who also had been deported, came back. They had seen my father in the camp of Oranienburg, and they wanted to stay together, but of course they had no saying over that, and my father was sent to the death camp of Neuengamme-Sandbostel. Later, we learned that my father had died there on May 13, 1945, just a week after the camp was liberated. What happened, there were no survivors because as soon as the Allied troops, in that case it were the Russians, came closer to the camp, they inoculated typhoid to all the remaining prisoners. Nobody survived that camp. There are no words to describe the atrocities committed in concentration camps. No films or books come even close to reproduce the atmosphere of suffering that still impregnates the walls of the barracks. As soon as the prisoners arrived from the cattle wagons, men and women alike had their hair shaved, all their clothes and belongings taken away, everything that could be a reference to what they wear. The Nazis wanted them only to be numbers, and those numbers were etched in blue ink in their flesh. It was the best way to dehumanize people. I never had the courage to visit one of those death camps. I only saw a transition camp in Belgium and visited the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., and the Anne Frank hiding house in Amsterdam. At all those venues, the energy is so subdued that people only whisper. People don't even talk. You feel the suffering, you feel the anxiousness. It's absolutely terrible. I always think also, no, I can make it. It was so long ago. I can't. I end up in tears. There's nothing that I can do about it. Using the myth of Aryan superiority white supremacy, the Nazis became the most cruel murderers in history. Their one-day plan resulted in a mechanic, massive, almost industrial destruction of Jews in concentration camps. The gas chambers and cremation ovens perfectly performed this officially planned and executed system to kill as many victims as possible. The horror of National Socialism and Nazism was not only a Jewish tragedy, it was a crime against all humanity. Besides the 6 million murdered Jews, adults and children in concentration camp, also journalists, intellectuals, handicapped and disabled people, homosexuals, slave citizens, and Romas were among the 12 million victims, whom Hitler saw as lives unworthy to be lived. Even Germans who were against Hitler, like Pastor Dietrich Bonhoeffer and the student Sophia Scholl, were also sentenced to death and murdered in concentration camp. My father had no intention of being a hero. In his calm way, he always seemed to take the right decisions at the right time for the circumstances. But he left us a legacy of great courage, humanity, and abnegation, and told us never to be afraid and always stand up for our principles. After the liberation, I remember my mother saying, "Children, this is a historical moment, the end of World War. We never will have war again." Unfortunately, we never stopped having wars and genocides. What was the lesson I learned from this experience? First of all, never, never, never give up. That was confirmed by Mitka Kalinski, a Holocaust survivor that I met at the Rotary Club of Sparks a couple of years ago. We had the same age when the war started, but his life was far more dramatic than mine because he went to several concentration camps. But he also said, never give up and always keep fighting fascism and similar hateful ideologies. Another survival technique we talked about is to keep your sense of humor. Jokes about the Nazis and even jokes about ourselves made us laugh. More surprising even, Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor himself, highlights the importance of humor in concentration camps. He explains that it was another of the soul's weapons in the fight for self-preservation. To be honest, it took me years to understand that we never should compromise with intolerance. Right after the war, we were very angry with the Germans. It was only later that I understood that wars have no winners. They bring sorrow and destruction on both sides. The German civilians, mostly women and children and elders, died from bombardments, from hunger, from cold, and suffered as much as we did, if not worse. I realized that I never should direct any resentfulness or bitterness, no matter how justified in my eyes, to any group of people. But until today, I have zero tolerance, and that is for Nazis, neo-Nazis, and swastika flags in the streets of America or any other country. It eludes me how any American would accept to have the word Nazi associated with his name. Just keep in mind that 460,000 Americans, 383,000 British, and 424,000 Canadian brave soldiers gave their lives to liberate us from the evils of fascism. And many of them were left behind at the endless field of white crosses, as far as the eye can see. Hatred must be exposed and denounced. It is poison. It divides, it perverts, it destroys, and it corrodes the container that carries it. It brings new wars, and there is no victory that even compensates for the loss of such a great number of young lives. As a child, my life was completely disrupted, and at a very young age, I became a rebel with a cause. But by now, my aim is, let us make sure to be messengers of peace. And the only way for that are forgiveness and reconciliation. I became a Rotarian whose aims it is to make the world a better place and practice peace through service. I even am a proud member of the inter-country committees from Rotary, which started after World War II between France and Germany, two peoples who hated each other, until the Rotarians stepped up and said, let's get together, let us sit around the table, eat together, become friends, understand each other, and now they are having humanitarian projects together. So that was my story. I will show you the slides, but before that, I have a message for young people. By the way, I'm absolutely delighted to talk to young people. And all I can say also is, please inform yourself. Be aware of what's happening. I'm already going downstairs, but your future is at stake. It's very serious. You have all the information you need. You have your teachers. There's information everywhere. Today, with the social media, ignorance is a choice. So, okay, you be the light you are. No matter how many shadows around us, we are here to manifest light and peace. A single lighted candle breaks the darkness. If you are influential in friendship, bring all your light to friendship. If you are influential in education, bring all your light to education. If you are good in animal care, bring all your light to animal care. And if for some reason you have a kiosk on the beach, bring all your light in making sandwiches. Don't waste energy judging, polarizing, attacking. That just deepens the separateness from our fellow humans. We have an immense power and can transform whatever needed if we are wise and brave enough to promote peace around us, starting in our own environment, no matter how small. Trust and vibrate the light you are. Souls are like candles. We can light up each other. Thank you. Okay. So now I will comment on the slides. You hear the story, but here are the pictures. Okay, as I said, born in 1933, I had a nice sheltered childhood. That was my picture at the Montessori school in Amsterdam in 1940. I was at the same Montessori school as Anne Frank. Not at the same time, because Anne was 4 years older. And when you're a kid, 4 years is a lifetime. Here is when the Nazis invaded Holland, Belgium, Luxembourg. All those countries were bulldozers in no time. The German troops arriving in the Netherlands. Tanks, trucks invading the country. The first thing they did was an airstrike on the port of Rotterdam. And all along the North Sea coast, the people had to evacuate, and they built what they called the Atlantic Wall, which was a protection against the English and also a way for the Germans that thought that from there they would go over to England very easily. They had Nazi soldiers everywhere in our street. It was not our country anymore. I still can hear the noise of their boots on the street. And they were singing that they were going against England, and they would demolish England, and all kinds of things like that. That was Goebbels who said, they say here, let me control the media. I don't think he used that word. That's a modern word. He said, let me control the broadcasting. That's how he made the people bring the radios to the Gestapo. And so within 24 hours, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, and freedom of the press were suspended. The Nazis told us, and that's in Dutch, that was written everywhere, if we wanted to be good patriots, we had to join the SS. Unfortunately, many young Dutch guys did it, thinking that it was a glory. Of course, it was not. Every night over Amsterdam, we saw the searchlights when the English planes were coming over. And as soon as they saw a plane, they shot it down. Here you see the Star of David that the Jewish people had to wear. They could not go in the street without that. A couple with a Jewish star on their clothes. And everywhere we saw those panels, forbidden for Jews. Could not go to the parks, could not go anywhere. This is the thing that I saw, that the most scary thing I saw when my father was standing next to my bed with armed soldiers and with the hand grenades in his boot. Here you see in our street how they went from house to house taking out the Jewish people. And they were rounding up the Jews everywhere. They were only allowed to bring with them what they could carry. And all that was anyhow confiscated as soon as they came to the concentration camp. We didn't even know at that time where they were going, because the Nazis told us, we have work for all those people. We will take them to working camps, and the children will be well treated and well fed. Only later we heard what the concentration camps were. The transport was in cattle wagons. They put so many people in a cattle wagon that they could not even sit down. There was no water, there was no toilet, there was nothing. People had to stand, and many of them already died during the transport. This is the map of all the concentration camps. There were something like 380 concentration camps over Germany, Poland, Hungary. This is a picture of a concentration camp. This is the St. Bostel-Neuengamme camp where my father perished. And those were inmates of that camp. At that time, the little German boys were brought up in the glory to be the future officers of the Third Reich. And at the same time, little Jewish boys were starving to death in concentration camp. Here you can see children in camps. The children were taken immediately to the gas chambers and the cremation ovens, because they could not work, they couldn't do anything. And they didn't want to feed those children. They were useless. Here you see a children's block. And Elie Wiesel, who himself, he was present when the children were taken to the ovens. And he wrote later, "I never shall forget the little faces of the children whose bodies turned into wreaths of smoke beneath a silent blue sky." One of those children was Anne Frank. I think you all know about Anne Frank. You must have been reading the Anne Frank diaries. She became famous after the war because people found her writings. Because at the time she was at the school like me, she was just a girl like us. My uncles told me, they put those poor prisoners naked in the bitter cold. They said, "No, we have to count you over and over and over again." That was all. They only wanted to break their spirit. And here was the final solution of the Nazis. It started with the gas chambers. And at the Wannsee, they asked, one of the Nazis said, "Okay, we have those gas chambers. What are we going to do with all the corpses?" And another said, "No, the prisoners can build cremation ovens, and they will put the corpses in the ovens. And once their job is finished, we will kill them also." So this was one of the cards that you had for coupons to have one warm meal a day, the one I described, and that today you would not even feed to pigs. And this is the little wonder stove, and how people try to keep warm without having anything to burn in their stoves. And that is the hay basket. That became my main thing of solar cooking, what I have been doing for quite a lot of years, but now it's another chapter. I'm busy with these things. So here you see people had no shoes, no socks, trying to keep warm. And here they were waiting for the soup. The kids were so hungry that they could not even wait to reach home. They already were eating what they had. And that was a soup kitchen. You cannot imagine what a horrible stuff that was. But when you're hungry, you eat anything. So here you see very undernourished children. And very often we saw people dropping dead in the streets. This is the official announcement of the Operation Manna. The planes coming over Amsterdam and dropping the food for us. And all the Dutch citizens on the roofs, "Thank you, thank you." And it was Mr. Ron Hampson from the Royal Air Force to whom I could say, "Thank you, sir," after 75 years. That was very emotional, I have to admit. Here you see, after the liberation, we had no police, so the guys with the helmets were the resistance. They took over from the German police. And you see our own flag with the orange banner. Everybody wanted to go on the tanks because those Americans, they had cigarettes, they had chocolate, everything we have been dreaming about. It is heaven opening, absolutely. Everybody was in the streets. And that was the bad stencil that the people had to warn us not to go to the Royal Palace because of the entrenched Germans there. Of course, all those things are written in Dutch, but it's just to show we almost had no ink, we only had bad paper, everything was missing. So here you see at the Royal Palace, people dead because they approached the palace. There were memorials everywhere because more than once, when there was an act of sabotage by the underground, the Germans just stopped a streetcar, the men and the boys had to come out and were shot on the spot. And everybody who was in the streetcar obliged to watch. This is how the prisoners came back from the concentration camps. And we're still hoping that my father would be among them. This is one of the memorial. This is at the War Sepulchres Association. After the war, they brought back the remains of the people who died in the concentration camp and brought them to the field of honor, among them my father's remains. This is an American cemetery in the Netherlands. I have a friend in the Rotary, and he was there. And he said, I know those cemeteries, they are so extremely well kept. Until today, we have waiting list of families who want to adopt an American grave. Even the children come to take care of the graves. Look, as far as the eye could see, I still have a hard time with that. When I go visit one of those cemeteries, it all comes back. Yeah. Look at those young faces. Many of them lied about their age because they wanted to go in the army and were not accepted if they were not 18 years old. Most of them lied of their age. And they died fighting fascism in World War II. We have to honor their sacrifice by not admitting Nazi flags and salads in our streets. Fascism is a mortal danger. Everybody who lived in Europe during World War II is aware of that. You cannot be both a good American and a Nazi. See, you see, the Nazi flags, the swastikas, it scares me when I see that. It really scares me. So there's a little silver lining. The concentration camp where my father died became a museum thanks to the Rotary and the Lions Club. So I kept it all the way it was for people not to forget. Thank you so much for your attention. Thank you.
Would you like to take questions?
Yes.
Students, you have not been excused. Thank you.
Before we say goodbye, does anybody have any final questions for Irene?
Can I see that tattoo? Can I see the tattoo they gave you?
She didn't.
Oh,
Get
okay.
What did?
She didn't get a tattoo.
No. No, I was not in a concentration camp. Only my father was taken. I was a kid. And we were not a Jewish family, as I explained. Jewish people, the whole family was gone, but we were not Jewish, so that only my father was the criminal.
Okay.
Yes.
After you were liberated, did you have any interactions with the Red Army? Or how did they treat you if you did?
With the Germans?
With the Red Army, the Soviets?
No, not so much in the Netherlands. It was more in Germany. We had the Canadians and the Americans. We were the lucky ones. We were.
Be loud for us.
What did you ask?
I can't hear either.
Oh, no, she asked if you ever got the messages that he sent.
Did you ever read any of the messages that you sent for your dad? During the war?
Did you ever read the messages that you were given to give?
No, we didn't. We were not interested. It was my grandfather's stuff. It was adult stuff. We just wanted to go play with our scooters. That was all that interested us. But we didn't even know we were messengers. For us, as kids, it's always fun. You want to play, you want to have fun.
What did the hospitals look like?
What did the hospitals? What did the hospitals look like? Were there hospitals?
The hospitals were normal. Lots of people, lots of sick people dying from hunger mostly. My two little brothers got polio because there was a big surge of polio at that moment. And we had no vaccine, we had nothing. So yeah, it was, and it took a long time after the war before people could go back to a normal life.
Got time for one more?
So, as a survivor of what it was like during World War II, what would you say that individuals could do to prevent this sort of fascism from possibly coming back?
What could you do, so having witnessed this, what could you do to prevent fascism from coming back?
At that time, I certainly didn't know. I was only 7 when it happened. But what we can do today is to be aware. Inform yourself. Don't permit that it comes back. That's why I'm doing these presentations. Since 2018, this is my 97th presentation today. As long as I can talk, I will not stop.
Okay, everybody. One more time, thank you very much, Irene, for coming and speaking with us today.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you for coming. Well,